1. The dying sky. Leary adjusted the observatory's primary lens one final time and stepped back, her four-fingered hands trembling. The data couldn't be correct. She recalculated, recalibrated, and reran the analysis twice more, but the numbers refused to change. Their sun, Cyril, glowed a sickly crimson through the viewfinder, not the healthy golden amber it should have been. The high scholar's heart raced beneath her translucent skin. At 105 cycles, she was considered young among the Alari, a species whose natural lifespan stretched beyond 300 cycles. Her people had inhabited Alari Prime for over 12 millennia, building a civilization of unprecedented harmony. Wars were ancient history, preserved only in academic texts. Violence had been engineered out of their genome countless generations ago. The Alari had mastered their emotions, their technology, and their planet. But they had never mastered the stars. Leary pulled up the historical data on her terminal. The projections had always shown that Cyril would become unstable, eventually. Every star died. This was cosmic inevitability. But according to the most conservative models, they had at least 3 centuries before Cyril's stability would begin to falter. The readings before her told a different story. Less than 100 solar cycles remained before Cyril would collapse and then explode in a supernova that would vaporize their world. You've been at the observatory for 2 rotations straight. High scholar, came a melodic voice from behind her. The council grows concerned about your absence. Leary didn't turn around. Elder Naimi, I was about to call for an emergency gathering. Oh, the elder glided forward, her ceremonial robes whispering against the polished floor. At 278 cycles, Naimi's skin had begun to take on the slight blue tinge of advancing age, but her movements remained graceful and deliberate. What troubles you so deeply? Wordlessly, Leary stepped aside, gesturing toward the data displays. Elder Naimi studied them, her large, luminous eyes narrowing. This cannot be accurate. Our astronomers have monitored Cyril for thousands of cycles. There has never been. Look at the helium fusion rate. Leary interrupted, protocol forgotten in her urgency. Look at the magnetic field variations. The corona temperature has increased 17% in just the last half cycle. These are outlier readings, Naimi said, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. Cyril experiences fluctuations. All stars do. Not like this. Leary's voice cracked. I've cross-referenced with all historical data. This is unprecedented. Cyril is dying, Elder. And it's happening now. Naimi was silent for a long moment. You will present these findings to the full council. Today, the Grand Chamber of the Alari High Council was a marvel of their civilization's architectural prowess. 12 crystalline pillars supported a dome that captured and redirected the light of Cyril, bathing the chamber in a warm glow. Today, that light seemed tinged with blood. 72 council members sat in concentric rings around the central speaking platform where Leary now stood, her data projected above her in 3-dimensional brilliance. She had spent hours preparing her presentation, making it as clear and irrefutable as possible. The evidence suggests Cyril will go supernova in less than 100 cycles, she concluded. We have perhaps 90 cycles before the radiation becomes too intense for survival, and 95 cycles before the gravitational effects begin to tear Alari Prime apart. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, but they were muted, controlled, as all Alari responses were. Their species prided itself on rationality and emotional stability. High Elder Talone, the council's leader, leaned forward. Your analysis is thorough, High Scholar, but surely you understand how extraordinary these claims are. Our most advanced stellar models have always indicated a timeline of centuries, not decades. The models were wrong, Leary said simply. Or perhaps something has changed within Cyril that we could not have predicted. The why matters less than what we do now. And what do you propose? Asked Elder Sori, her voice crisp with skepticism. Leary took a deep breath. What she was about to suggest would be met with resistance, perhaps even outrage. We must prepare for evacuation. We must build ships capable of carrying our population to a habitable world. The stillness that followed was profound. Then, predictably, came the objections. Our technological capabilities do not extend to interstellar travel, said one elder. The nearest potentially habitable systems are dozens of light years away, said another. The resources required would be astronomical, added a third. Leary had anticipated these responses. We have the theoretical knowledge. We've simply never had the need to implement it. Until now. She paused. There is another option. The chamber grew silent again. We could seek help. Elder Naime's eyes widened. You cannot mean... Yes, Leary said firmly. We could contact other civilizations. This suggestion provoked the closest thing to uproar the Ilari Council had experienced in generations. The first law of Ilari civilization, established after their own tumultuous ancient history, forbade contact with other intelligent species. Isolation had been their path to peace. Out of the question, High Elder Talon declared, rising to his feet. We have abided by the first law for 10,000 cycles. It has kept us safe. Safe until now, Leary countered. But Sarah will destroy us all if we do nothing. Your projections are deeply pessimistic, said Elder Sori. I propose we assemble an independent team to review the data. If there is genuine cause for concern, we can begin developing evacuation strategies using our own resources and technology. Heads nodded throughout the chamber. This was the Ilari way, methodical, careful, deliberate. And how long will this review take? Leary asked, struggling to keep the frustration from her voice. As long as necessary to ensure accuracy, High Elder Talon replied. Perhaps 3 cycles. Leary's heart sank. 3 cycles. 3 precious cycles wasted on verification when the data was already clear. And if my findings are confirmed, then we will consider all viable options within our technological capabilities and our laws, Talon said firmly. The meeting was concluded. The council would reconvene after the independent analysis. Leary was dismissed. She walked slowly back to her laboratory, despair settling over her like a shroud. The Ilari prided themselves on their rationality, but sometimes rationality could become a prison of its own. Their society had grown so accustomed to stability and caution that it had lost the ability to act decisively in a crisis. In her lab, Leary closed the doors and stood before the one piece of equipment the council knew nothing about. In violation of numerous protocols, she had constructed a deep space transmission array capable of sending signals far beyond their solar system. It had been a theoretical project, an intellectual exercise, or so she had told herself. The truth was, Leary had always been fascinated by the possibility of other intelligences among the stars. While her people had turned inward, she had secretly gazed outward. Now, she faced a terrible choice. Obey the laws of her people and potentially doom them all, or violate their most sacred principle in a desperate gamble for survival. Leary thought of her mother, now frail with age. She thought of the children in the learning centers, their futures stretching before them. She thought of 12,000 years of Ilari culture, art, and knowledge. Her decision made itself. The transmission would need to transcend language barriers. Mathematics was universal. Prime numbers, atomic structure, the value of pi. But cold equations alone might not convey urgency or elicit compassion. So Leary added something more. The rhythmic pattern of an Ilari heartbeat and simple images of her world. And most crucially, images of Ilari children looking up at their darkening sky. With trembling hands, she activated the array. The signal burst outward at the speed of light, repeating every 12 minutes. A desperate call into the cosmic void. Please, Leary whispered to the emptiness of space. Someone hear us. 2. Earth hears the echo. The New Mexico night was unusually clear, the Milky Way a brilliant splash across the black canvas of the sky. Inside the primary control room of the SETI International Complex, technical specialist Lin Vu stared at her monitoring screen, brow furrowed. That can't be right, she muttered, tapping commands in her console. The pattern appeared again, consistent, structured, repeating exactly every 12 minutes. Lynn had been with SETI for only 3 years, but she'd analyzed thousands of signals. Most were easily identified as natural phenomena or human-made satellite transmissions. This was different. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, isolating the signal and running it through various filters. The structured elements became clearer: prime numbers, mathematical constants, and something else. A rhythmic pulse that repeated throughout the transmission. Lynn reached for her comm unit. "Dr. Rahul, you need to see this." 10 minutes later, Dr. Avani Rahul, the facility's director of astronomical physics, leaned over Lynn's shoulder, his normally composed face tense with excitement. "How long has it been repeating?" he asked. "At least 6 hours. That's when it first entered our monitoring range." "Origin?" Lynn pointed to a star map. "Somewhere in this region. About 27 light-years out. Direction is consistent with HD 85512, Dr. Rahul noted. K-type main sequence star. There was an exoplanet discovered there decades ago, potentially habitable. The signal contains more than just mathematics," Lynn said, pulling up another screen. "There's a visual component embedded in the transmission pattern." Together, they watched as the computer gradually rendered the images. Shapes appeared, structures unlike any human architecture, landscapes under a reddish sun, and then, "Are those?" Dr. Rahul whispered. "Children," Lynn confirmed. "At least I think they are. The proportions suggest juveniles of their species." The images showed delicate beings with large, luminous eyes and four-fingered hands. They were looking upward, their expressions unmistakable even across the species barrier. "Fear, hope, pleading. We need to take this upstairs," Dr. Rahul said. Immediately, within 24 hours, the United Nations Security Council had convened an emergency session. The signal, now designated Transmission Elysium, had been verified by 17 independent observatories worldwide. It was unquestionably artificial and extraterrestrial in origin. Secretary General Elena Reyes stood before the assembled representatives, her expression grave. "We face an unprecedented moment in human history. We have received what appears to be a distress call from an intelligent civilization." The chamber erupted in overlapping voices until Secretary General Reyes raised her hand for silence. "Our scientific advisors have analyzed the transmission. It contains mathematical sequences that are universal, suggesting an attempt to establish communication across language barriers, but also contains images that strongly suggest this civilization is in danger." The main screen displayed the rendered aliens, clearly children, looking skyward with expressions of fear. "These beings are sending us images of their young," Reyes continued. "In human communication, this would be a clear appeal to compassion. They're showing us what they stand to lose." "It's a trap," said the Russian representative bluntly. "A psychological manipulation to lower our defenses." "To what end?" asked the representative from Kenya. "They're 27 light-years away. This message took 27 years to reach us. Any response we send won't reach them for another 27 years. Unless they have technology far beyond our comprehension," the Russian countered. "We know nothing about them, which is precisely why we should respond with caution," added the Chinese representative. "Humanity faces numerous existential challenges already: climate instability, resource depletion, ongoing conflicts. We must prioritize our own survival." Lin Vu, invited as a technical expert, shifted uncomfortably in her seat at the side of the chamber. She wasn't supposed to speak, but something compelled her to raise her hand. To her surprise, Secretary General Reyes nodded in her direction. "Technical specialist Vu, you have insight to offer." Ling Stu, Pao Ding. "I've been analyzing the mathematical components of a signal. They include stellar physics equations, specifically the kind used to model stellar collapse and supernova events, combined with the images of their children looking at their sun." She took a deep breath. "I believe their star is dying, much faster than they expected. They're facing extinction." A heavy silence fell over the chamber. "If that was a human child," Lin added quietly, "we'd have already launched." The debate continued for hours, then days. Scientists, ethicists, religious leaders, and military strategists all weighed in. The world was divided. Many saw an opportunity for humanity's greatest moment of compassion, while others warned of unknown risks. On the fifth day, the United Nations General Assembly called an emergency vote. Should humanity respond to the alien distress call? The final tally was 154 in favor, 19 against, with 20 abstentions. Humanity would answer. The question now was, what could they possibly do to help a civilization 27 light-years away? 3. The bridge between worlds. The Assembly Hall at the United Nations Cape Canaveral complex buzzed with activity. Engineers, scientists, and diplomats from 37 nations crowded around holographic displays, arguing, collaborating, and occasionally celebrating breakthroughs. At the center of it all stood Commander Naomi Okeke, former leader of the UN peacekeeping forces in the Arctic conflict. At 48, her close-cropped hair had begun to show strands of silver, but her bearing remained military precise. She studied the main projection, a massive schematic of what would become humanity's most ambitious spacecraft. The Unity Dawn, she said, tasting the name. How soon can it be ready? Dr. Emily Takahashi, Propulsion Systems Director, grimaced. The conventional systems are straightforward. The Alcubierre drive is less so. The Alcubierre drive, named for the 20th century physicist who first theorized it, had been in development for nearly 15 years. It promised faster-than-light travel by warping space itself around the vessel, creating a bubble that could traverse vast distances while technically never breaking Einstein's cosmic speed limit. It had never been successfully tested at full scale. We're installing the final gravitational field generators now, Dr. Takahashi continued. The antimatter containment systems passed all simulations. But, Commander, she lowered her voice. This is still experimental technology. Under normal circumstances, we'd spend another decade in testing before risking human passengers. These aren't normal circumstances, Naomi replied. Every day we delay is another day their star creeps closer to collapse. How long to reach operational status? 3 months minimum. And that's with every resource at our disposal. Naomi nodded. Then we have our timeline. Across the hall, Lin Vu sat at a communication station, surrounded by linguistic specialists and mathematicians. As the one who had first detected the alien signal, she had been seconded from SETI to the Unity project, much to her simultaneous terror and delight. We need to let them know we're coming, said Professor Mbeki, the South African linguist. But how do we communicate that across the language barrier? The same way they reached out to us, Lin suggested. Mathematics, universal constants, and images. Their task was to craft humanity's first official communication to another intelligent species, one that would convey both their intention to help and their estimated arrival time. The response transmission included Earth's location, diagrams of the Unity Dawn, and a series of images showing humans working together to build the ship. They included mathematical equations, expressing relativistic principles and the theoretical functioning of the Alcubierre drive. Finally, they added a timestamp using pulsar frequencies as a universal clock. The message was sent from radio telescopes across Earth simultaneously, aimed at HD 85512. It would take 27 years to reach its destination at the speed of light. But if all went according to plan, the Unity Dawn would make the journey in less than 7 months. Tensions rose as the launch date approached. Nations that had contributed the most resources to the project demanded greater representation on the crew. Military analysts warned of leaving Earth defenseless if the mission transferred too much advanced technology to a potentially hostile species. Religious leaders debated the theological implications of alien contact. Through it all, Commander Okeke maintained her focus on the mission. She personally selected each crew member, ignoring political pressure and choosing based solely on expertise and psychological resilience. Technical specialist Vu, Naomi said during one such interview, "You're requested to join the communication team." Lin blinked in surprise. Me? But I'm just a signal analyst. There are far more qualified. You were the first to hear them, Naomi interrupted. You understood what they were trying to tell us before anyone else. That intuition can't be taught. She leaned forward. Besides, your background in both astrophysics and comparative linguistics makes you uniquely qualified. Linguistita. Commander, I have family here. My parents will be immensely proud, Naomi completed, and scared, as they should be. This mission carries significant risk. I won't pretend otherwise. She fixed Lynn with a steady gaze. But something tells me you've already decided. She was right. From a moment Lynn had seen those alien children looking up at their dying son, she had known she would do whatever it took to help them. The final crew consisted of 28 specialists from 17 nations. Engineers, physicists, medical experts, xenobiologists, linguists, and security personnel. Commander Okeke would lead, with Dr. Takahashi as her second in command. 2 days before launch, an unexpected transmission arrived from HD 85512. Lynn was called to the communication center at 3 a.m. It's definitely from them, the night shift analyst told her. Same signal characteristics, same mathematical structures. The message was brief but clear. It contained only one image. Thousands of the alien beings, Ilari, as they had begun to call themselves based on patterns in their transmissions, gathered in what appeared to be a ceremonial space. They stood with their four-fingered hands raised toward their reddening sun. The final element of the message was a simple mathematical expression that, when translated, conveyed a single concept. We are ready to believe in kindness. The day of launch dawned clear and bright. Unity Dawn sat on its launch pad, a sleek, elongated vessel nearly 300 meters in length. Its conventional engines would carry it beyond Earth's atmosphere, where the Alcubierre drive would activate, creating the space-warping bubble that would carry them across the stars. Crowds numbering in the hundreds of thousands surrounded the launch site, with billions more watching via global streams. For the first time in generations, humanity stood united in purpose. As the crew boarded, Naomi paused on the gangway, looking back at the planet she might never see again. Doubts that she had suppressed for months suddenly threatened to overwhelm her. What if this was humanity's greatest mistake? What if they arrived only to find hostility? Or worse, what if they couldn't help at all? Commander, Lynn stood behind her, equipment pack slung over her shoulder. Everything okay? Naomi straightened her shoulders. Just taking one last look. Let's make history, Specialist Vu. The launch proceeded flawlessly. Unity Dawn reached low Earth orbit, completing system checks before moving to the designated activation zone for the Alcubierre drive, far enough from Earth that the space-time distortions wouldn't affect the planet's gravitational dynamics. All systems nominal, Dr. Takahashi reported from the engine control station. Antimatter reactors at full capacity. Gravitational field generators online. Begin drive sequence, Naomi ordered. Throughout the ship, the crew secured themselves in acceleration couches designed to minimize the theoretical discomfort of entering a space-time bubble. No one knew exactly what it would feel like. The simulations suggested a momentary sensation of extreme pressure, followed by nothing inside the bubble. The ship would technically be motionless relative to its own frame of reference. Activation in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The universe seemed to fold inward. Lynn felt as though every atom of her body was simultaneously compressed to an infinitesimal point and stretched across an infinite distance. Colors she had no names for flashed before her eyes. Sounds that couldn't exist in normal space vibrated through her bones. Then, abruptly, normalcy returned. The stars visible through the viewport looked exactly the same. Drive status? Naomi's voice was tight. After a moment of tense silence, Dr. Takahashi responded. Bubble stable. Field integrity at 98%. We're doing it, Commander. We're moving faster than light. A cheer erupted throughout the bridge. Humanity had broken the cosmic speed limit, but the jubilation was short-lived. 2 weeks into the journey, as the crew settled into their routines, the first serious malfunction occurred. We're experiencing fluctuations in the forward gravitational field, Dr. Takahashi reported, her fingers flying over control panels. The bubble geometry is becoming unstable. Can we compensate? Naomi asked, trying to, before she could finish, reality seemed to twist. The stars visible through the viewports smeared into rainbow streaks. Alarms blared throughout the ship. The bubble's collapsing, someone shouted. For 3 terrifying seconds, Unity Dawn existed partially in normal space and partially in the warped bubble. When stability returned, Dr. Takahashi's face had gone ashen. Commander, we've just lost 2 minutes. Explain. The internal chronometers are all synchronized, but they're now 2 minutes ahead of what they should be, based on our mission clock. And she hesitated. We've lost contact with Specialist Zhang. He was in Section 5 during the fluctuation. It took 3 hours of searching to accept the truth. Li Zhang, engineering specialist from China, was simply gone, either shifted into some other dimension or disintegrated when the bubble partially collapsed. His loss cast a pall over the mission. The Alcubierre drive was recalibrated and resumed operation, but the crew now moved with the heavy awareness that they were pushing the boundaries of physics with technology they didn't fully understand. 5 months into the journey, another transmission arrived from the Ilari. The message was simple but heartbreaking. Mathematical projections showing their stars' accelerating decay. Their calculations matched what Unity Dawn's own sensors were now detecting as they approached the HD 85512 system. The Ilari were running out of time faster than anyone had anticipated. We need to push the drive harder, Naomi told Dr. Takahashi. Can we increase our velocity? We're already at 99% of theoretical maximum. Any more strain on the generators might collapse the bubble entirely. Then we maintain course and pray we're not too late. As Unity Dawn entered the outer reaches of the HD 85512 system, the crew got their first clear view of the Ilari star. Once a healthy K-type main sequence star similar to Earth's sun, but slightly smaller and cooler, it now pulsed an angry red, violent solar flares extending millions of kilometers into space. That star is months away from going supernova, Dr. Rahul observed grimly. Not years. Certainly not decades. Can they evacuate? Naomi asked, based on the technology levels we've observed from their transmissions. No, not their entire population. The final approach to Ilari Prime was made with conventional engines. The planet came into view, a world slightly larger than Earth, with massive blue-green oceans and 3 small continents. Under different circumstances, it would have appeared idyllic. Now, bathed in the sickly red light of its dying star, it seemed like a world already in mourning. We're being hailed, Lin announced from the communication station. Multiple signals consistent with their previous transmission patterns. Can we respond in a way they'll understand? I think so. They've had 27 years to study our original message. If they're as advanced as we believe, they'll have made significant progress in deciphering our language. Naomi took a deep breath. Open a channel, send our pre-prepared greeting, and inform them we're beginning orbital insertion. Unity Dawn settled into orbit around Ilari Prime. Through high-resolution cameras, they could see sprawling cities of crystalline structures, vast agricultural zones, and what appear to be gathering places now filled with Ilari looking skyward. They're waiting for us, Lin said softly. They've been waiting for decades. A delegation was prepared. Commander Okeke would lead, with Lin as communications specialist, Dr. Rahul as scientific advisor, and 3 security personnel, though weapons were deliberately left behind. First contact would be peaceful or not at all. As the shuttle descended through Ilari Prime's atmosphere, Naomi found herself whispering a prayer she hadn't uttered since childhood. They were about to meet an alien civilization that had placed its final hope in the hands of strangers from across the stars. Let us be worthy of their trust, she murmured. The shuttle touched down in a vast plaza surrounded by soaring crystal towers. Waiting for them was a gathering of thousands of Ilari, standing in perfect concentric circles. At their center, a single figure stepped forward, slender, with luminous eyes and translucent skin through which twin hearts could be seen beating rapidly. It was time to meet their hosts, and to learn whether humanity could actually save them. 4. A truth unveiled. The first face-to-face meeting between humans and Ilari took place in what the aliens called the Chamber of Eternal Light, a vast dome whose crystalline panels refracted the dying sun's rays into a kaleidoscope of colors. Under different circumstances, it would have been breathtakingly beautiful. Now, the reddish light cast an ominous pall over the proceedings. Leary, the Ilari High Scholar who had sent the original distress signal 27 years earlier, stood at the center of the Ilari delegation. Now in the final third of her life cycle, her translucent skin had begun to show the faintest blue tinge of age. Beside her stood the 7 members of the Ilari High Council, the governing body of their global civilization. The human delegation, led by Commander Naomi Okeke, approached slowly, careful to follow the protocol they had established through their limited communications during orbital insertion. "We bring greetings from Earth," Naomi said, her words translated by the devices Lynn had programmed with the rudimentary Ilari language they had constructed during the journey. "We have come in response to your call for help." Leary stepped forward, her movements graceful and fluid. "Your presence honors us beyond expression," she replied in halting but understandable English. "For 27 cycles of your world, we have watched the skies, hoping that our message reached compassionate minds. That hope sustained us even as Cyril, our son, betrayed all predictions." She gestured toward the viewing panels overhead, where the bloated red star pulsed ominously. "Our scientists now project total stellar collapse within 5 of your Earth days. The supernova will follow immediately after." 5 days. The humans exchanged shocked glances. Their own observations had suggested months, not days. "Are you certain?" Dr. Rahul asked. "Our measurements indicated a longer timeline. The degradation has accelerated exponentially," explained an elderly Ilari whom Leary introduced as Elder Naimi. "What began as a gradual decline has become catastrophic failure of the stellar core. We need to examine your data," Naomi said urgently. "And we need to understand your evacuation capabilities immediately." The following hours were a blur of information exchange. The Ilari were remarkably forthcoming, sharing everything they knew about their star's condition and their own technological capabilities. Their civilization was advanced in many ways. They had mastered clean energy, developed sophisticated medicine that had eliminated most disease, and created materials unknown on Earth. But interstellar travel had never been a priority. They had small atmospheric vessels and a few orbital platforms, but nothing capable of evacuating their population of 9 billion. "We could begin construction of emergency evacuation craft," Elder Talon, the head of the council, suggested. "With your Alcubierre technology." "There's no time to build enough ships," Naomi cut in. "Not in 5 days. And the Unity Dawn can carry at most a few thousand passengers." The grim reality settled over both delegations. A complete evacuation was impossible. As the technical teams continued their analysis, Naomi pulled Leary aside for a private conversation, with Lynn accompanying as translator. "There's something I don't understand," Naomi said. "Your civilization is clearly advanced. You must have observed the warning signs of stellar instability long before you sent your message. Why weren't you better prepared?" Leary was silent for a long moment, her large eyes fixed on Naomi's face with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. "Commander Okeke," she finally said, "there is something you must know, something the Council would prefer I not share with you." She led them to a small, secluded chamber away from the main conference areas. Once they were alone, Leary activated a security field that hummed softly around them. "The Ilari have a biological inability to deceive," she began. "Our neural structures simply do not allow for the construction of deliberate falsehoods. It is why our society has known peace for so long. Deception is the root of conflict." "You're saying your species cannot lie?" Lynn asked, fascinated. "Correct. But this same neural architecture has other consequences." Leary's voice dropped. We cannot create beyond established patterns. What you would call imagination, the ability to conceptualize that which does not exist, is severely limited in our species. Naomi frowned. I'm not sure I understand the significance. We observe the signs of Cyril's instability, Leary continued. I personally identified the acceleration years ago, but our solutions were constrained by our existing knowledge and patterns of thought. We could conceive only of small evacuation vessels similar to those we already possessed. The resources required to build enough of them were prohibitive. But you reached out to us, Lynn pointed out. That was innovative. It was desperation, Leary corrected, and it was forbidden. The first law of a Lari civilization prohibits contact with other species. Why? Naomi asked. Because, Leary said, her voice barely above a whisper, you are not the first civilization we have contacted. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Naomi and Lynn exchanged startled glances. Twice before in our history, the Alari made contact with other intelligent species, Leary continued. The first occurred 9,000 cycles ago, during our early space exploration. We encountered a warlike race that saw our inability to deceive as weakness. They attacked without provocation, seeking our technology. And the second? Lynn asked. 3,000 cycles ago, a trading species that initially seemed benevolent. They exchanged knowledge with us for nearly a century before attempting to subvert our planetary defense systems. They too sought to take rather than share. So the first law was established as protection, Naomi concluded. Yes, isolation became our safety. Leary's hands trembled slightly. When I sent the distress call, I violated our most sacred principle. The council was displeased, but as Cyril's condition worsened, they reluctantly acknowledged the necessity. But why didn't you tell us this from the beginning? Lynn asked. We've been operating under the assumption that we're your first contact. The council feared that knowing of our previous encounters might make you hesitant to help us. Leary's luminous eyes filled with what appeared to be tears. They feared you would see us as the architects of our own isolation and extinction. Naomi considered this new information carefully. It explained much about the Alari's technological limitations, advanced in many ways, yet critically underdeveloped in others, particularly in areas requiring the conceptual leap to envision technologies radically different from their current capabilities. There's one other thing you should know, Leary added. The Council has authorized me to offer you any of our technology, any of our knowledge, in exchange for saving as many of our people as possible. We have medical techniques that could extend human lifespans by decades, energy systems that could end scarcity on your world. We didn't come here to negotiate a trade, Naomi said firmly. We came to help. Nevertheless, the offer stands, Leary replied. Now, we should return to the others. Time is precious. As they walked back to the main chamber, Naomi's mind raced with the implications of what she'd learned. The Alari's limitations weren't just technological, they were neurological. They couldn't conceptualize solutions outside their established frameworks, which meant that if humanity was going to save them, it would require thinking far beyond conventional evacuation strategies. When they rejoined the technical teams, the mood was grim. Dr. Takahashi and the other engineers had confirmed what they already suspected. There was no way to evacuate even a significant fraction of the Alari population with available resources. We could begin constructing additional ships using Alari materials and our Alcubierre principles, Dr. Takahashi suggested. But at maximum production capacity, we might save a few thousand at most. The Council has been debating selection criteria, Elder Naimi said solemnly. We are prepared to accept the necessity of choosing who will survive. Naomi had been standing by a viewport, staring out at the Alari landscape. Now she turned suddenly. What about your moons? The Alari had 3 moons, one large satellite approximately the size of Earth's moon, and 2 smaller ones. The large one, what do you call it? She asked. Alarie, Leary supplied. The sacred sphere. Is it geologically stable? Does it have any atmosphere? Elder Talon looked puzzled. It has minimal atmosphere, insufficient for life. Its core is solid, its surface composed primarily of silicates. We maintain several research stations there, but it is uninhabitable without. Does it have water ice? Subsurface resources? Yes, Leary confirmed. Significant water ice at the poles and beneath the surface crust. Naomi turned to Dr. Takahashi. Could we do it? Could we move it? For a moment, Dr. Takahashi looked bewildered. Then understanding dawned in her eyes. You're suggesting we turn their moon into an arc ship? Exactly. Naomi's voice was charged with intensity. We use the Alcubierre drive principles not to build ships, but to create a space-time bubble around the entire moon. The energy requirements would be astronomical, Dr. Takahashi cautioned. Far beyond what the Unity Dawn can generate. But the Alari have energy technology we don't, Naomi countered. Leary, your fusion systems, could they be adapted to power such a project? Leary and the other Alari looked stunned. The concept was so far outside their framework of thought that they seemed unable to process it. You propose to move our moon? Elder Talon finally asked, his voice incredulous. To transport it to another star system? Yes, Naomi said simply. Instead of building thousands of small ships, we build one enormous one, using a celestial body that already exists. We install life support systems, power generation, and the space-time displacement technology from the Unity Dawn. The chamber erupted in overlapping conversations as both humans and Alari grappled with the audacity of the proposal. It could work, Dr. Rahul said, excitement building in his voice. The Alari moon has sufficient mass to maintain structural integrity within a displacement field. With their energy systems and our Alcubierre technology, we would need to install massive field generators across the lunar surface, Dr. Takahashi noted, and the computational systems to coordinate them, and life support for millions, added another engineer. How many could we save? Naomi asked. The calculations were complex, but the answer eventually emerged. With maximum efficiency and using existing Alari habitation technology, they could potentially evacuate up to 20% of the population, nearly 2 billion people. It wasn't everyone. It wasn't even close to everyone, but it was far more than they had thought possible just hours ago. The Alari Council withdrew to consider the proposal. When they returned, their decision was unanimous. They would attempt the moon evacuation. The selection of evacuees would be based on maintaining maximum cultural and genetic diversity, with priority given to children, young adults, and individuals with critical knowledge. Work began immediately. Unity Dawn's crew transferred their Alcubierre technology to Alari engineers, who began constructing massive field generators. Alari's existing research outposts were rapidly expanded into habitation zones. Transport ships began continuous flights from the planet to the moon, carrying evacuees and essential supplies. It would be the largest migration in the history of either species, and they had less than 5 days to complete it. As the evacuation proceeded, Naomi found herself standing again at a viewport in the Chamber of Eternal Light, watching the frantic activity below. Lin joined her, exhaustion evident on her face from her constant work as communications coordinator. Do you think we'll make it? Lin asked quietly. I don't know, Naomi admitted. But I do know that whatever happens, we've given them something they didn't have before. What's that? A chance. Naomi turned to look at the young specialist. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change the fate of worlds. Across the chamber, Leary approached with fresh data displays. Commander Okeke, we have new projections from our stellar physicists. Cyril's degradation continues to accelerate. We may have less time than we thought. Naomi examined the data, her heart sinking. How much less? Perhaps 3 days, not 5. 3 days to evacuate nearly 2 billion people and successfully transform a moon into an interstellar arc ship. It seemed impossible. Then we work faster, Naomi said firmly. We don't give up. Leary's eyes lingered on Naomi's face. You truly believe we can succeed? It wasn't a question, but Naomi answered anyway. Ido, even though you've only just met us, Even knowing our past encounters with other species ended in betrayal. Those weren't humans, Naomi replied. And this is now? We choose our own path. Leary nodded slowly. There is one other possibility I wish to discuss with you. A way to buy more time. She explained a theoretical approach, developed by Ilari physicists but never implemented. A network of gravitational wave inductors placed in specific orbits around Cyril could potentially absorb some of the star's excess energy, temporarily slowing the collapse. Why haven't you attempted this? Naomi asked. The system would require continuous monitoring and adjustment from within the danger zone, Leary explained. The radiation levels would be unsurvivable for any Ilari, but it could buy us more time for the evacuation, perhaps an additional 12 hours. Maybe more. 12 hours during which hundreds of thousands more could be saved. I'll take the proposal to Dr. Takahashi, Naomi said. If it's viable, we'll find a way. As she turned to leave, Leary caught her arm, the first physical contact between human and Ilari. Commander, she said softly, your species is unlike any we have encountered. You came across the void not to take, but to give. You offer solutions we could never have conceived. You risk yourselves for strangers. She released Naomi's arm. The council was wrong to fear contact with others. They were simply wrong about which others to trust. Naomi nodded, unexpectedly moved by the alien's words. We'll save as many as we can, Leary. I promise you that. The race against time continued, with both species working in perfect coordination. The moon was being transformed, one section at a time, into a self-contained world that could sustain the Ilari for the long journey to their new home. A habitable planet in the Kepler 442 system that Earth astronomers had identified years earlier. But as the third day began, it became clear that they were still falling short. Even with round-the-clock transport flights, they would only evacuate perhaps 15% of the population before Cyril collapsed. Something more had to be done, and Naomi Okeke was about to make the most difficult decision of her life. 5. The choice of light. The command center established in the Ilari High Council building had become the nerve center of the evacuation effort. Screens displayed real-time updates from every aspect of the operation. Transport schedules, habitation construction, field generator installation, and the increasingly unstable condition of Cyril. Naomi stood at the central console, reviewing the latest projections. They had successfully evacuated just over 1 billion Ilari to the moon arc, with transport ships running continuously. But time was running out. Cyril's core was collapsing faster than even the most pessimistic models had predicted. Commander, Lynn approached, her expression troubled. I've been working with the Ilari physicists on that gravitation wave inductor idea. We think it could work, potentially buying us up to 18 hours. That's excellent news. There's a complication, Lynn continued. The system requires on-site monitoring from within the danger zone. The radiation levels are already at lethal exposure thresholds. Remote operation isn't possible. There's too much electromagnetic interference from the stellar flares. Someone would need to manually calibrate the inductors and monitor the feedback loops. Naomi nodded slowly. How many more could we evacuate with 18 additional hours? At current capacity, approximately 300 million more. 300 million lives. The number was almost too vast to comprehend. I'll do it, Naomi said quietly. Lynn stared at her in shock. Commander, that's a command decision, Naomi finished firmly. I won't order anyone else into a suicide mission. You're needed here to coordinate the evacuation. Dr. Takahashi can handle that. She knows the technical aspects better than I do anyway. Naomi placed a hand on Lynn's shoulder. This is my choice, specialist. I need you to respect it. Before Lynn could respond, an alarm blared throughout the command center. One of the Ilari technicians called out urgently. Solar prominence detected. Radiation surge incoming. Shields at maximum. Naomi ordered. The protective energy shields around the major Ilari cities strengthened just as a massive solar flare erupted from Cyril. The planet's atmosphere glowed with aurora-like effects as charged particles interacted with the magnetic field. When the surge subsided, damage reports began flooding in. 2 transport ships had been disabled in orbit. Communications systems in the southern hemisphere were offline. And worst of all, 3 of the habitat domes on Ilaria had suffered power failures. "We're losing time," Naomi said grimly. "Lynn, give me the specifications for the gravitational wave inductors. We need to deploy immediately." As preparations began for the inductor mission, Leary approached Naomi with unexpected news. "My mother refuses evacuation," she said, her voice steady despite the pain evident in her eyes. "As do many of our elders. They say they have lived their lives on Alari Prime, and they will end them here." "That's their choice," Naomi acknowledged. "But what about you? You should be on the next transport." Leary shook her head. "I will remain with my mother, and I will assist with the inductor deployment. My expertise in stellar physics may prove useful." "Leary, you've done enough. Your people need leaders on Ilaria to rebuild your civilization. They have the council, and sometimes, Commander Okeke, a greater service can be rendered in one moment of sacrifice than in centuries of leadership." Her luminous eyes met Naomi's with perfect understanding. "You have already taught us this lesson." The Unity Dawn shuttle was modified to withstand the intense radiation it would encounter. The gravitational wave inductors, 12 in total, were loaded aboard, along with the necessary control systems. As the departure time approached, Lynn confronted Naomi one last time. "I'm coming with you," she declared. "Absolutely not," Naomi replied. "You're going to Laurier with the final evacuation group." "With respect, Commander, the inductor control systems are complex. You'll need someone who understands the mathematics behind the gravitational wave patterns." Lynn stood straighter. "Besides, I've been running simulations. If we initiate a cascading absorption sequence, we might be able to gain not 18 hours, but nearly 30. 30 hours? Yes, but it requires precise calibration of the wave harmonics, something I've been working on with the Ilari physicists." Naomi studied the young specialist's determined face. "You understand what you're volunteering for?" "I do, and I've already transmitted my personal messages to my family." Lynn managed a small smile. "They'll be proud, I think." Eventually, after a long moment, Naomi nodded. "Very well. Gather what you need. We launch in 20 minutes. The farewell was brief. Dr. Takahashi would now command the evacuation operation, with Elder Talon coordinating from the Ilari side. The last transports would depart over the next 12 hours, carrying as many as they could to the Ark Moon. As Naomi and Lynn boarded the shuttle, accompanied by Leary and 2 Ilari engineers who had also volunteered, Dr. Takahashi offered a final salute. "It has been an honor, Commander." "The honor was mine," Naomi replied. "Get our people home safely, Emily." The shuttle launched into Ilari Prime's darkening sky. Behind them, the frantic evacuation continued. Ahead, the bloated red form of Cyril pulsed ominously, solar flares extending millions of kilometers into space. They established orbit at the calculated optimal distance, close enough for the inductors to function effectively, but as far from the star as the mathematics would allow. One by one, the 12 devices were deployed into precisely calculated positions. Inside the shuttle, protected by the best radiation shielding available, they initiated the system. The inductors began absorbing the excess energy from Cyril's chaotic fusion reactions, channeling it through artificial gravitational waves that spread the energy more evenly throughout the star's mass. "It's working," Lynn reported, monitoring the feedback data. "Core collapse rate is decreasing. We've already bought 3 additional hours. Can we push it further?" Naomi asked. "If we increase the absorption rate on inductors 3 through 7, yes, but it will accelerate the degradation of their containment fields." "Do it. We need every minute we can get." As the hours passed, they worked continuously, adjusting the inductors as needed, compensating for equipment failures, and monitoring Cyril's increasingly erratic behavior. The radiation levels inside the shuttle climbed steadily despite the shielding. "Transport status?" Naomi asked during a brief communication window with the command center. 1.4 billion evacuated, Dr. Takahashi reported. "We're running at 110% capacity thanks to the extra time you've given us. Keep pushing. We'll hold Cyril as long as we can." By the 18th hour, The first physical symptoms of radiation poisoning had begun to appear. Nosebleeds, nausea, fatigue. The Ilari engineers, with their different biology, showed different symptoms. Their translucent skin darkening with spreading patches of blue-black discoloration. Inductor 5 is failing, Lynn reported, her voice weaker than before. Attempting to compensate with 7 and 8. How much longer can we maintain the field? Naomi asked. At current degradation rates, perhaps another 6 hours before catastrophic failure. 6 more hours. 6 more hours in which thousands of transport ships could make their final runs to safety. Leary, who had been monitoring Cyril's condition, suddenly straightened. Commander, I'm detecting unusual energy patterns in the stellar core. The absorption may be creating a new reaction pathway. Is that dangerous? Not necessarily. In fact, her voice took on a note of wonder. It may be creating a more stable intermediate state. If we reconfigure the remaining inductors to reinforce this pattern, we might gain significantly more time. The reconfiguration was complex, requiring all of their remaining strength and concentration. By the 24th hour, they had succeeded beyond their most optimistic projections. Cyril's collapse had slowed dramatically. Final transport departing now. Came Dr. Takahashi's voice over the communication channel. 1.7 billion evacuated total. Unity Dawn preparing for final jump to escort Ilaria. Acknowledged, Naomi replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Initiate arc drive sequence as soon as you clear the system. Commander, Dr. Takahashi hesitated. It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve with you. The honor was mine, Emily. Now go. Get them to safety. As the final transmission ended, Naomi turned to her companions. The radiation had taken its toll on all of them. Lynn sat slumped at her console, blood trickling from her ears, but her hands still moving weakly over the controls. The Ilari engineers had lost consciousness hours earlier. Only Leary remained somewhat alert, though her once translucent skin had turned almost entirely midnight blue. We did it, Naomi said softly. 1.7 billion. More than we dare hope, Leary agreed. My people will never forget what humanity has done for us. One life for millions, Lynn murmured. A fair exchange. More than fair, Naomi replied, summoning the strength to move to Lynn's side. You should rest now. I'll monitor the final sequence. In the viewport, they could see the massive form of Ilaria, now surrounded by the faint distortion of the space-time bubble generated by the adapted Alcubierre technology. Unity Dawn hovered nearby, ready to escort the moon arc on the first part of its journey. Then, with a flash of light that briefly outshone the dying star, the arc and its escort disappeared into faster-than-light travel, carrying the survivors of Ilari civilization to their new home. Naomi watched the empty space where they had been, a sense of peace settling over her despite the pain racking her body. They're safe, she whispered. We did it. Leary moved to the viewport, her movements slow and pained. Would you like to see something beautiful, Commander? Before the end? I would. Leary adjusted the viewport's filtering, changing the spectrum to reveal Cyril's corona in all its ethereal splendor. Despite the star's imminent death, it remained a thing of awesome beauty, a cosmic fire that had nurtured life for billions of years. In our ancient texts, Leary said, it is written that when an Ilari dies, their energy returns to the stars from which all matter was born. Today, we return together. A good death, Naomi agreed. Among friends. As consciousness began to fade, Naomi thought of Earth, blue and beautiful, circling its own stable star. She thought of the unity that had brought humanity together for this mission, of the bridges built between worlds. And she knew that whatever happened next, it had all been worthwhile. The last thing she saw was Cyril's light, filtered through Leary's translucent hand as the Ilari reached out to touch her own. 1 year later, on a new world circling a steady yellow star, the survivors of Ilari civilization gathered in a vast plaza. At its center stood a monument, two figures cast in an alloy that captured and held the light, a human and an Ilari, hands outstretched toward each other. The inscription, rendered in both English and the Ilari script, read simply, "They gave everything so that we might live. May we be worthy of such grace." Near the monument, a young Ilari child practiced the human language with careful determination. "One life," the child said, looking up at the statue, "can change the fate of stars." Elsewhere in the cosmos, the light from Seral's final blaze continued its journey outward, carrying with it the echo of courage, sacrifice, and a profound truth that compassion can transcend the boundaries between worlds. When humanity answered the desperate call for help, they had done more than save a species. They had illuminated the darkness of space with the brightest light of all, hope.